Parliament in March. That killed 7. Then 2 weeks ago, a suicide bomber murdered almost 24 in Manchester, many of them children, during that Ariana Grande concert. And now, on Saturday, 3 attackers screaming Islamic slogans mowed down pedestrians with a van in central London and then stabbed and slashed the survivors. 7 died. Many more were gravely wounded. London Bridge may not be falling down yet, but there is no doubt ISIS has a plan for that, too. Islamic terror attacks have become common in recent years, depressingly common, and each one provokes exactly the same response. Our leaders in government and the media tell us they're angry, and clearly they are, but at whom are they angry exactly? They shake their fists at the terrorists or the militants or the extremists or whatever the euphemism of the day happens to be at the time, and then they pledge that whatever happens, our civilization will never be bowed or shaken, although clearly we are both. But then they quickly turn their attention to the group they actually hate the most, far more than any terrorist, their critics. Anyone who dares question their leadership or criticizes their flaccid, mindless response to Islamic terror, those are their real enemies. Here, for example, is the response that Donald Trump got when he dared to point out that, to a large extent, terror in the West is an immigration problem.
Well, the president doesn't want us to be politically correct, right? So let's not be PC about this. Is the president trying to provoke a domestic terrorist attack with this Twitter rant, because only to prove himself right?
There are serious concerns about this president's mental stability.
President Trump has been commenting on the London terrorist attack via Twitter. One of his posts in the past few hours said, quote, "We must stop being politically correct and get down to the business of security for our people. If we don't get smart, it will only get worse." Do you feel the president is trying to perpetuate fear of terrorism by tweeting the way he has today?
When was the last time you heard anyone on the left talk that way about Islamic extremism? Now, nobody on television openly defends ISIS, of course. ISIS is impossible to defend. But the real rage of these people is reserved for those who appear critical of Islam. Terrorism may be bad, but raising doubts about multiculturalism is worse. Foreigners come to our countries and kill our people. You'd think our leaders would blame them, but no, they blame us who live here. They blame our history, they blame our culture, our opinions, our religion. It's our fault. That is their core assumption, and you see it in all they say. Why else, in the face of totalitarian threat, would they so eagerly abandon our freedoms, beginning with speech? In the UK, for example, there have been multiple arrests for Islamophobic remarks made online, not actions, remarks. In the U.S., where courts still rhetorically observe the Bill of Rights, it falls to the private sector to censor speech. Facebook, Twitter, cable news. But the results are the same. Fanatics from other countries want to force us to change the way we live, and our leaders are, in effect, helping them because on at least one point, our leaders agree with ISIS. The West is not worth defending. That's how they feel. Charles Krauthammer is a writer and columnist and resolute defender of the West, and he joins us tonight. So, Charles, why the displaced rage? I'm not defending the president's tweets. I don't think he ought to be tweeting at all. But you look at television, you would think that his crime is greater than the crime committed on London Bridge.
Look, you're always going to have lunatic voices on the left. Some will get expressed on cable TV. But generally speaking, this is not... Look, there are a lot of stories about the lunacy of the left. The suppression of speech on campus, the rioting, the sort of anti-fascist so-called rioting, if somebody dares say things politically incorrect. That's all true. Those are real stories. They ought to be covered. But the London attack is not really a media story. It's not a political correctness story. It's a story about Islamic radicalism. And the tragedy here is, the president is sort of right in talking about immigration. But the point he's missing is that the problem was immigration 30 years ago. We're 30 years late. The terrorists were 30 years old. This was a failure, and it generally is a failure, of assimilation, integration of these immigrants by mostly Europeans over the last 30 years, which is why it is not amenable to solution.
Well, but it is in this country because, of course, Europe is at least 30 years ahead of us on the same immigration path. And so you could, if you took it seriously, prevent to some extent what has happened in Europe. But it is also a political story when people are being arrested for criticizing a religion or voicing their political views. I mean, that is actually happening in Europe and has for a while.
Right. They don't have the First Amendment. We don't have the same problem of assimilation. America is blessedly different in this regard, which is one reason why you have an epidemic of radical Islamic terrorism in Europe, and you don't have it here. And the one major attack, the one catastrophic attack, was entirely from outsiders who worked their way through our system. Here, what is the characteristic of the European attacks, so tragic and so hard to deal with, is the fact that these are British citizens raised in a country, second generation. Here are second generation immigrants, generally speaking. I'm not speaking about the Muslims in particular. Assimilate. That's the story of the Jews, the Italians, the Poles. And the third generation is so assimilable, you can hardly tell.
Do we know that?
That is not the case. Well,
the scale is so different. So this country is what, 1% Muslim? France, so we don't know exactly, but maybe 10%. I mean, it's a much different scale in Europe from what it is here.
Absolutely. 10% of the population in France is estimated to be Muslim immigrants. No, it's a question of scale, but it's a question of also history. We have a history of being able to import immigrants in a way and to make them into Americans. But that is true. The question of scale is important. It's one of the reasons why people here are so strongly against illegal immigration, because the fear is that this is sort of a monoclonal immigration. It's Hispanic speaking, mostly Mexican, which is wonderful. But the problem is that if they become a critical mass in certain parts of the country, then you get a problem of assimilation where people end up not speaking the language and not integrating. In Brooklyn, for example, you've got 150 nationalities, but they are so relatively small that the assimilation almost is automatic. That's been our history for 150 years.
But don't you think our attitudes have changed? Assimilation doesn't happen. We were talking about this in the commercial break. It doesn't happen unless the host country demands it and says, here's our culture, here's our language, here are our values, adopt them or leave. Normal countries do that. We don't do that anymore.
Well, we do it to a certain extent. I think the bilingual education fad was a terrible mistake because it created separateness. When you add to that the monoclonal immigration, meaning it's not from around the world, it's not from, equally distributed the way it was 100 years ago at Ellis Island, but it is mostly Hispanic speaking, and you end up in a community where you don't get to learn English. That, I think, is the problem. But you're right. There is a loss of spirit in the West, not so much in the U.S. as in Europe, where we don't believe in ourselves, where our history is flawed, where we teach our kids all of the sins of the American Republic and none of the glories. When you do that for a long enough time, you end up with a generation that doesn't know why they should be proud to be American.
Well, exactly. And
why they should be defending America. We are not anywhere near there, but that's the danger.
It seems like we are. I mean, what are our shared values? If you believe in multiculturalism, then by definition, you're not going to rise to defend your culture because it's equal to every other culture.
Well, it depends how you define multiculturalism. I mean, we are a multicultural nation, and we accord respect to the different religions, ethnicities, languages. It's when you say that our own history is so corrupt that our tradition is the one that is uniquely the one that is not worth learning. That's when you run into problems.
What?
I don't think we're near there, but there is a danger, and I think we need to be very careful how we handle that, or we could raise generations that don't know why they should be proud to be Americans and why they should be Americans.
I hope we're as far from that as you say. Charles Krauthammer, thank you.
My pleasure.
Turns out that Karam Butt, he's one of the London Bridge attackers apparently, was featured in a recent British documentary called The Jihadist Next Door. Fox News has not yet confirmed that it was him in the video, but Sky News, CNN, The New York Times, and Channel 4 have all reported it is in fact him. In any case, the man appears in the documentary attending a rally in a park where a radical preacher predicts that one day the entirety of Britain will be ruled by Sharia law. Watch this.
The only English white person who's a non-Muslim was part of our group. But because he's white and he's English, he can go. But all of us that were just praying, we have to stay. This is the reality.
This is the reality.
This is the reality. Don't forget all the laws and all this. This is the reality.
There's no reason for us to be detained now. There's no evidence.
We were just praying. We can't pray as well.
Once again, it looks like this man's extremism was obvious for years, but the attack it caused was somehow a surprise, as it always is. President Trump is using the London attack to lobby for the return of his travel ban that would affect 6 countries. Muslim-majority countries. On Saturday night, the president tweeted this: "We need to be smart, vigilant, and tough. We need the courts to give us back our rights. We need the travel ban as an extra level of safety." And today he wrote this: people, the lawyers, and the courts can call it whatever they want to, but I'm calling it what we need. And what it is, a travel ban. A travel ban is a toned-down version of what the president called for on the campaign trail in 2015.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
Mustafa Tamiz is a Democratic strategist and a former consultant to the Department of Homeland Security, and he joins us tonight. Thanks a lot for coming on. Now, all the focus has been on the president's motives in this. What does he really mean? What does he desire personally? And I guess I would say that's unknowable, as it always is with people's motives. The question is, does the country deserve a higher level of protection in light of what we're watching happen in Europe? And I don't see how we don't deserve that.
No, I agree with you that we need a higher level of protection, especially nowadays. But we have to identify where the threat is. As Charles was saying, many of these radicals are homegrown, meaning that they've not come from somewhere else. They've grown within these countries. And so we've got to counter violent extremism and make sure that the ISIS's narrative of a clash of civilization is not the one that we adopt. And you're right. Nobody knows President Trump's motive. What we're concerned about is that sometimes his rhetoric inflames that, and that's the concern by the intelligence organizations,
okay, but this
counterterrorism groups.
I guess. I mean, it's hard to generalize about intelligence organizations or counter-intel people. I mean, it's a huge group. But look, this has been going on for a long time. You can hardly blame his intemperate language for all of it. But in the 18 terror plots that have been foiled in the last couple of years, 2/3 were hatched apparently by people who would be affected by this temporary stop on immigration from those countries. So why would that have been a bad thing? 2/3.
Look, I don't know. Like, Cato Institute did a study, and they looked at people from 1975 to 2015, and 3.5 million refugees have come here. Not a single one has committed a terrorist attack. So that's just a big number. And so we have to do this as the world is, rather than the way sometimes maybe the president and others might want to see it. This is not a clash of civilization. We've got to effectively, from law enforcement and intelligence and human intelligence, go after the threat. And doing the travel ban is not the most effective way. And that comes from
look, I'm sorry, you threw out a
country.
fake statistic. I don't know if some think tank gave it to you, but I mean, here are the actual
Cato
numbers on
Institute
this.
is a notable think tank on the
I'm just telling you,
conservative side.
I'm not attacking. I'm just saying, here are the actual facts. May 17th, 2016, two guys from Somalia busted with bomb-making material. November 16th, another guy from Somalia, Ohio State attack, as you know. September 16th, another Somalian. Here's another Afghan, Somalian, Iraqi, Somalian, Iraq, Sudan, Iraq. I mean, this is all within the span of a year, people arrested for terror plotting. Look, I'm not impugning everyone from Somalia. I'm just saying this is real.
Well, the real threat is homegrown terrorism, which we have to go after. Charles is right. When Charles was talking about that this is second, third generation in Europe that have not assimilated, and one of the reasons why the assimilation hasn't occurred is Europe created a hostile environment for those people that were coming into this country. And what we don't want to do is we make the United States. You know what?
I'm sorry. I just can't. I can't let that stand. So you're saying that people attack the West because the West somehow isn't nice enough to them, welcoming them into. Yeah, you said you just said that. You said, come on now, I'm trying to keep this civil. But I've got to say, it's grating to hear someone say that they face a hostile environment when they're brought over here at public expense and subsidized. Like, how is that hostile? I'm missing that.
Look. If you study counterterrorism and you look at Europe, what's made the environment really bad is many of these folks don't feel like they have opportunities and creates a false narrative. What the beauty of America is our hyphen. The first day that you land into the United States, you're an Italian American, you're an Irish American, you're a Jewish American, you're a Muslim American. That hyphen allows everybody to have their American identity. And that is something that Europe doesn't have. You have second, third, fourth generation people there that still consider themselves from the land that they came from.
And that's the Brits' fault. So the people who were murdered in Manchester, their kids, it's their fault because they just weren't welcoming enough? Like, what are you saying exactly?
What I'm saying is that we have to learn from their experience and make sure what we do here doesn't take place.
What we do?
You
Wait
know,
a second, they let in all these people who are now trying to kill them, and it's their fault?
What's different is that we are a country of immigrants bred from religious freedom. Those are our cornerstone principles, and that principle has allowed us to grow and flourish for over 200 years.
Okay.
This is
I'm
something
fully
that we
aware
should
of
build our
that,
nation on.
but are you saying that Muslims don't experience religious freedom in Great Britain?
Look, what I'm telling you is
saying
based on
exactly?
what I'm saying is that terrorists want to hurt and kill us, and the way they do it is by dividing. They're looking to recruit people that are within these countries. Online, there are recruiters that are looking for people that feel like there is a wedge in society. And by rather than creating more wedges and making the environment more fertile for people to recruit, we've got to figure out a way to push back, hunt down, and kill them.
What you're
doing,
I mean, you know, part of what you're saying is right, but the subtext is the same as it always is, which is blaming the victims for this. The Brits didn't deserve this. Yes, it is true.
That's not
you
true.
just suggested that they created a hostile environment for immigrants and that they somehow abridged their religious liberty. Yes, you did.
I'm not the one that started tweeting against the mayor of London right after a terrorist attack. That's what President Trump did.
Well, he's not
President
here.
Trump is creating a divisive environment.
So it's his fault.
I'm telling you how the divisive environment gets created.
It's always the fault of an American, I've noticed. Okay.
Look,
so maybe it's the fault of the people who come here, use the public resources.
You know, I'm an American, and I don't want the fault of our nation. Like, I'm as equally American as any other American.
But I'm not contesting that. I'm merely objecting to your instinct to blame the victims in Europe for the attacks upon them.
You're blaming the victim.
Those are the words that you're using, Tucker. They created a hostile environment, and I'm watching and have for 30 years. Very much the opposite.
That is part of the challenge, because when you want people to assimilate, it's a two-way interaction. The people coming in the country have to want to assimilate, and the nation, the host nation, has to assimilate them. So when 2, 3, 4 generations go in and the assimilation is not occurring, we have to figure out, you know, what the problem is. The beauty of our nation is that people assimilate much faster than in Europe,
but if we
because of the American hyphen.
If we complain about refugees or immigrants coming in from a certain region, then we're somehow abetting terrorism. It's a fantastic rhetorical trick you've devised to get people to shut up, but it doesn't work with me.
I think you're playing it. I'm not trying to shut you up, Tucker. God forbid I'm trying to shut you up.
But you're saying basically anybody who complains is abetting ISIS.
That's what you're saying.
Not true.
That's what you're saying. These are your words. These are not my words. These are your interpretations. This is where the wedge begins to
know what you're saying. I'm not that smart, but I know what you're really saying.
I'm not sure if it's clever or...
Okay. We're going to let our viewers judge. We're out of time. Inmates are truly running the asylum at Evergreen College. We're putting that in quotation marks in the state of Washington. 50 professors have signed a letter endorsing the actions of students who tried to drive a professor off campus and physically threatened him because of his race. An update from there. Also, Hillary Clinton under investigation once again by the U.S. Senate. What might they find? Clinton Cash author Peter Schweitzer joins us next.
These racist teachers have got to go. Hey, hey, go home. Whiteness is the most violent system to ever breathe. Black power! Black power! Black power! It's not an accident that all of our administration is white. Right. It's not an accident. That is systematic.
I'm tired of white people talking about what black and brown people need. You don't know.
You and the police.
Well, Evergreen College in Washington State is melting down, and that's not overstatement. 2 weeks ago, we interviewed a professor there, a math professor called Brett Weinstein. He's a liberal who's been overwhelmed by the left. He had a mob of students demanding he be fired because he refused to leave campus for a day because he was white. They demanded he leave, and he said, no, I don't think so. Now, at least 60 Evergreen faculty and staff have signed a letter supporting the students against the professor. They're demanding a disciplinary investigation of Weinstein, who they say has, quote, endangered students by inviting, quote, white supremacist backlash through his refusal to leave campus because he's white. This is all real, by the way. Tommy Lahren is a senior communications advisor for the Great American Alliance, and she joins us now. Tommy, what is going on in Evergreen?
Oh, boy. I mean, the fact that this is happening in the United States of America, first of all, is disturbing. But isn't it odd, Tucker, that there used to be generations of Americans that fought against segregation, and now it seems the new generation is fighting for segregation? It's lunacy.
Well, this poor Professor Weinstein, we talked to him and said, you know, you're probably liberal. He said, actually, I'm a lefty. I mean, I think he's a Bernie Sanders guy. But he remembers liberals as they were a generation ago against segregation and hurting people on the basis of their skin color. And he woke up one day and everyone around him disagreed. I mean, it's a 180-degree change, it looks like.
Well, I can't believe it. And to throw out these words like racist, especially at a professor who said, I think we should all come together on campus. No one should stay home. We shouldn't have a day of exclusion. The fact that he came out and said that was brave. But then to be called a racist because of it, it just shows how ridiculous these labels are and how damaging they can be. But the most disgusting and disturbing part of this whole thing is that there are other professors that are sticking up for the mob-like protesters. Now that's what's got me.
Well, you got to kind of wonder their motives, which are, I guess, unknowable. But I wonder how many of them are just afraid to disagree with the mob. I mean, they no longer run Evergreen, obviously. The president's a spineless character. He bowed out a long time ago. So basically, it's being run by an angry mob implying violence. Maybe they just don't want to get hurt.
Well, that's probably part of it. But here's the deal. We know this. The alt-left is well-organized and they're well-funded. And they are on college campuses, and that is going to be a battleground for us, not just now, but for election cycles to come. So that's why it's so important for me to be a part of groups like Great America Alliance that says, you know what, we're going to do this professionally and with class. We're not going to have mobs. We're going to get our message out there, and we're going to do it using free speech. But we're not going to do it like the students at Evergreen College, because that's disruptive, it's disgusting, it's violent, and it's un-American.
Where's the Civil Rights Division at the Justice Department? I mean, if you had any other college where a mob of students were implying physical violence, threatening someone because of his skin color, and you had faculty doing the same, I mean, shouldn't there be a civil rights investigation of this? Where's the state senate in the state of Washington? Where's the governor? Where's the mayor of Olympia? Like, where are the authorities here exactly?
Everyone is afraid to speak out because if they speak out against this, they are labeled a racist. Everyone is so afraid of being labeled a racist, so they've got the power then. It's the alt-left, it's mobs like this that have the power, and they hold the power. And I also hold the mainstream media accountable for that as well. The mainstream media needs to be coming out and saying this is crap. And until they do that, groups like this feel justified and validated for this kind of activity, and it's disgusting. But when people start becoming fearless enough to stand up, that's when this stuff will end. But not until then.
I agree with that completely. And I wonder how long they think it's going to be before the mob comes for them, since the revolution always eats itself. I mean, seriously, well, you really think you buy a pass by nodding in agreement with the mob? No, you never do.
Oh, no, of course not. And, you know, these individuals, they claim to be sticking up for civil rights. They claim to be social justice warriors, and they act like this. I mean, that video that's been posted on YouTube is appalling. Anyone, can you imagine being a parent right now ready to send your child to college? Can you imagine being a parent of a conservative student ready to send them to college? Can you imagine what that must feel like?
Can you imagine being an alum getting a phone call from a fundraiser saying, hey, why don't you give some money to a college? Any college? Other than Hillsdale? No way! Tomi Lahren, thanks a lot for coming on tonight.
Of course, thanks for having me.
The Clintons are under investigation yet again, continuing a trend that goes all the way back to the early 90s, almost without interruption. Will this investigation be the one that finally uncovers something serious? The author of Clinton Cash will weigh in on that next. Peter Schweitzer joins us. It's time for tonight's reality check. We want to show you a video, but before we play it, a warning. This tape is more than 20 years old. It comes from a different time when our leaders were less enlightened and morality was not as advanced as it is today, obviously. We're broadcasting it purely for its historical value. Now, that said, you might still want to remove children and the elderly from the room as it plays. It could be triggering to the sensitive. Here it is.
That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more, by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years, and we must do more to stop it.
Wow, and to think he said that on national television during the State of the Union, no less. Does Hillary know about this? President Clinton used the highly offensive term illegal alien. Criminal aliens were referred to as, quote, criminal aliens, and he warned that illegal aliens take the jobs of American citizens and take a toll on public services. He bragged about increasing deportations. In other words, the Bill Clinton of 1995 told the truth about immigration plainly and without apology. That was a very different time and a very different Democratic Party, one that cared about the country it governed. The party would never tolerate such hate think today, nor would the media. It's too clear and easy to understand, and therefore people might be persuaded by it. Speaking of the Clintons, they're under investigation yet again. Set your clock by it. The Senate Judiciary Committee is launching a probe into Hillary Clinton's actions while she was Secretary of State. According to the Daily Caller News Foundation, which first reported the story in April, Clinton pressured government officials in Bangladesh to drop a corruption investigation of Muhammad Yunus, a businessman and Clinton Foundation donor. Peter Schweitzer is the president of the Government Accountability Project. He's also the author of Clinton Cash and Throw Them All Out, 2 great books, and he joins us tonight. So, Peter, what's the substance of this investigation? What are they looking for?
Well, basically, the substance of this investigation is that senior State Department officials, in seeing this investigation taking place of this longtime Clinton friend, told the Prime Minister of Bangladesh to get their mother, the Prime Minister, to call off the dogs on the investigation. And if they didn't do that, according to the Prime Minister's son, they were going to have the IRS audit him. The son of the Bangladeshi Prime Minister lives in the United States, has been here for 17 years. So it was a very serious threat. And based on what that individual has said, it's a pretty detailed claim. I think that's why Senator Grassley is saying this needs to be investigated.
So is it typical for a Secretary of State to insert herself into the internal politics of Bangladesh?
No. I mean, look, I think we could all say this is a family friend. It would have been fine to say, hey, how's this investigation going? Where do you think it's going to lead? But to essentially be charged with sicking the IRS on foreign government officials and their families for these purposes is way beyond the pale. And unfortunately, Tucker, it fits the pattern of the kind of behavior that the Clintons engage in, which is using government power as a tool and a cudgel against the opponents or people that are looking for wrongdoing that's taking place either by them or by their powerful friends.
Right. As anyone who works at a non-liberal foundation in D.C., whose tax-exempt status was held up by Lois Lerner, can tell you firsthand. So what about the broader investigations into the Clinton Foundation's activities? Are they ongoing? Will they be? What's the status?
Well, I know that the FBI continues to look into the Clinton Foundation on a number of levels, some of them the pay-to-play charges, others related to their sort of keeping of the books or the cooking of the books, and those are ongoing. And look, a lot of people will say, Tucker, well, she lost, what's the big deal? I think the issue is win or lose. If this kind of behavior is allowed to go on, and it's not even investigated by federal authorities, it just encourages this kind of behavior by the political class, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. So I've said from the beginning there needs to be either an independent counsel or there needs to be a grand jury to look into these charges so they get aired and looked at once and for all, and we can either put this to rest or we can have a trial where charges are actually brought.
Well, sure. And it would, dropping them undermines people's belief in the rule that everyone's treated equally under the law. Kind of weird, though. I feel like I know an awful lot about a number of FBI investigations in progress because the leaks show up in the newspaper every day. I haven't seen any leaks out of this investigation.
No, that's right. Really, since the campaign, when the Wall Street Journal ran the front page piece on this investigation, it's been very quiet. I know from personal knowledge that the investigation's going on. Where it has stood for a while, Tucker, is that FBI field offices went to the Department of Justice looking for subpoena power and other tools. They were turned down by the Obama Justice Department. It'll be interesting to see under the new Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, whether that changes. I think it should. I think it's a question of giving them the right tool, and let's just see where the facts lead. I think that's ultimately where we all should come down on this.
Of course. And by the way, just for the record, I'm glad there are no leaks. There should never be leaks from ongoing investigations. So I do find it curious that the Clintons are never announced, in addition to all their other titles, as subjects of a current FBI investigation. That seems like maybe you could add that to the list of titles.
Yeah, it'd probably be pretty repetitive, Tucker. That's something that could be said for quite a while. Going back to the 90s, even in the 2000s, there were certain claims about conduct that was taking place, the Mark Rich pardon, and now with the Clinton Foundation. It's an ongoing look, and I think it just requires the kind of investigation that at least some people in Washington don't seem to want to take place, which for the life of me is ridiculous standard.
I mean, when they sold all the presidential pardons? Yeah, I was here for that. That was great. Peter, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, there's been total chaos in Portland, Oregon, where the left got violent in an effort to shut down a free speech rally. We'll talk to an organizer of that rally coming up. Plus, Wonder Woman is a feminist icon, but apparently her new movie isn't feminist enough for some feminists. Could that be the... It was a testy weekend in Portland, Oregon. On Sunday, supporters of President Trump held a free speech rally in downtown Portland. A couple hundred people showed up, but they were surrounded by a much larger mass of protesters, some armed with bricks, knives, brass knuckles, to make it clear that the free speech people were not welcome in that open-minded city. Dan Springer was at the rally in Portland. He joins us now for a recap. Dan, what happened?
Yeah, hey, Tucker. Well, this started as a rally of about 500 hardcore Trump supporters who really wanted to prove that they could go into liberal Portland and stand up for their beliefs. There was a lot of talk about free speech and not backing down to the left. And frankly, many of the Trump supporters seemed ready to physically fight the opposition. Some brought shields and sticks. They had their own security people looking to bounce anyone from the opposing side. But this rally was mainly peaceful. They were also completely surrounded by several thousand people protesting their rally and their right to free speech. On one side was a group of union members. On the opposite side was a large group of peace activists and sort of mainstream Portland liberals. They shouted down the Trump supporters as being racist and anti-immigrant. They came in the name of peace, but I saw a lot of obscene gestures and heard a ton of words that we would have to bleep. They were fired up, but also not violent. And then there were the anarchists, easy to spot because many of them covered their faces with bandanas or ski masks. They wore helmets and came armed with whatever they could scrounge up. They seemed to want a fight with the Trump supporters and the police, who stood in a strong line in full riot gear between them and the Trump rally. Some of them belong to the Portland chapter of Antifa, short for anti-fascist, but really these are many of the same people who cause property damage and spar with police every May Day. Some in the group started throwing bricks and bottles, and that's when police finally went on the offensive. They deployed several flashbang grenades and pepper balls. They pushed the anarchists back and then eventually corralled them into an area. Police confiscated dozens of weapons that you saw there, bricks, knives, that sort of thing. But amazingly, no assaults, no injuries, very little, if any, property damage. They did arrest 14 people, but when it was over, police said it went as well as it possibly could have. Tucker?
Thanks, Dan. It'd be interesting to know how many of the anarchists went to expensive private schools. I'm thinking 100%, but we don't really know. Thanks for that report.
Sure.
Joey Gibson was there on Sunday. He was at the free speech rally, an organizer of it, and he joins us now. Joey, what happened?
We had a great day. Talked about freedom, a lot of positive energy, good speakers. No hate speech on our side, tons of hate speech on their side. Very successful rally.
Was there violence?
There was no violence. I know that, I know of one kid that got beat up by the anarchists or Antifa. But for the most part, it was a peaceful day. I do feel like they're trying to provoke us. Once we left the rally, we had a bunch of people yelling in our faces. And I think they're trying to get us to punch. But, we don't do that. I mean, we only act out of self-defense.
I think you're best sticking with that policy. So what was the point of your protest?
Well, it wasn't a protest. It was more of a rally. It was to promote freedom in one of the most liberal cities in the United States of America. And we also got to start talking about God more, especially in these liberal cities. And we really want to inspire the youth and inspire the conservative and the libertarians that there is faith, to organize and to act in these liberal cities.
Are you from Portland?
I'm from Vancouver, Washington, which is right across the bridge.
Yeah, right over the river.
Yep.
So do you think you changed any minds?
It's hard to tell. We had several people come up to us and thank us for our positive message, because if you listen to the media, we're like some white supremacist group, like we're a hate group. But unfortunately, they're using deception to try to keep people away from us. So I do know we changed some hearts and minds of some people who actually listened to our words. It was a positive experience, and hopefully, we can continue to do this and get more people on board and understand this isn't about racism or social justice. This is about, limited government, making our government small.
You look outnumbered. We're putting up on the screen, I don't know if you can see it, video I think that you shot, and it's you all surrounded by an awful lot of other people. What was the ratio, would you say? How many more of them were there than you?
There was a lot. I mean, we're talking Portland, Oregon, so we're, at least 2 to 1, maybe 3 to 1 more than us. But we still had huge numbers. I mean, this is the largest conservative rally ever in the history of Portland. But Portland Police and the Homeland Security did their job to make sure that, we were allowed to organize in Portland.
The largest conservative rally in the history of Portland. That really is the tallest building in Uzbekistan, but still impressive. Joey, thanks a lot for coming on site with
Thanks
that
for
update. Appreciate it. Imagine if it was your job to wade through every insane news story that came across your desk every day. You'd need help, and we've assembled it. We call it Top That. Our job, find the craziest story of the day. Joining us this evening, Catherine Lyons. She's the managing editor at Famous DC, and Aaron McPike, White House correspondent for the Independent Journal Review. Catherine, you first.
All right. Well, my story annoys me so much that it makes me laugh, so it's okay.
Okay.
So apparently there's a little bit of backlash surrounding a woman who a lot of girls look up to. And don't worry, she's nonpartisan. It's Wonder Woman. She did really well in the box office this weekend, broke it, and a couple hearts apparently, because there's one critic out there who did not take too kindly to this movie. He's warning everybody that the movie falls short of shattering the glass ceiling. And there's another man out there, and he's my favorite because he is extremely offended that he was not invited to the all-women screening in Austin, Texas.
Whoa, there was a screening for just women?
Yes, just women.
Is that
no
allowed?
Men.
Can you do that?
Why not?
Huh.
It's a woman movie.
He wanted to go to the movie, but you're not allowed to see Wonder Woman at this screening unless you're a woman, or say you are.
Right. It was an all-male staff hosting the event and all-women audience members.
Boy, I cannot keep up with the many levels of the gender wars.
There's only two genders.
There are only two. That's a controversial statement, Catherine. So we're going to go on to you, Aaron McPike. Can you top that?
We'll see. Small local story. They say it takes money to make money, as you may know. So there is a suburb in Alabama that wants to charge teenagers $110 in order to complete their summer gigs like mowing the lawn, babysitting, having a lemonade stand, something like that. And the reason this came to light is because a man with a lawn care business noticed that a teenager was mowing lawns in his neighborhood and complained and said, you need a business license in order to do that. Well, they are having a meeting of the town council tonight to clarify the language from this ordinance that was passed in 2007.
Ah, so the real purpose of licensing becomes clear, which is to reduce competition from upstarts.
Apparently so.
Can you imagine if you were the guy who turned in a kid for mowing lawns and not having a business license to do it?
Jealous. He's jealous.
No, bound for a dark place, I would say. Both those stories are appalling. Both are ridiculous. Yours is the most ridiculous, however, Catherine, because newsflash, Wonder Woman can't be a feminist icon because she's not real. Wonder Woman doesn't actually exist. Her bracelets do not repel bullets. She cannot fly.
You're going to anger a lot of women out there.
I know I am, but I say this as a truth teller. I'm sorry, and some truths need to be told, and now there's Aquaman for that matter, just to make it balanced.
Captain Underpants?
I'm not going there. Catherine, Aaron, thank you both.
So she won.
She won, but of course you get a participation trophy because this
we're tied now.
is a new and modern age. Exactly right. And I'm glad you're keeping score.
Yes.
Thank you. Coming up, Hillary Clinton says Macedonia rigged the last election. No one can figure out why Macedonia would want to do that. Seems like a nice place. Up next, we have a theory to explain why the Macedonians would do that. Here's their anthem again, by the way.